and welcome to The Book Was Better, where we're watching today's movies one book at a time. Cue Bare Necessities! Disney animation is an absolute treasure trove of beauty, fantasy, music, characters, excitement, adventure, and so many other things I could list. There's also a mountain of corruption I could mention about one of the most powerful and influential corporations on the planet, like how Disney ruined public domain laws just so they could retain ownership of Mickey Mouse. But I'm trying to be upbeat for this episode. The Jungle Book was actually the very last animated picture that Walt Disney himself was directly involved in before his death in 1966. The movie came out the next year in 1967 to critical acclaim. The initial script captured the dark and dramatic storyline of the original book. However, Walt Disney wanted to change the tone of the script to give it a lighter, more Disney-esque touch. The story was changed to that of Mowgli being escorted through the jungle and to the nearest village before the tiger Shere Khan could kill him. And thus, any chance of this being a faithful adaptation died. But audiences didn't care about that, and the Jungle Book ended up making over $37 million in the domestic box office alone. Subsequent releases in 1978, 1984, and 1990 upped that number, making this movie extremely profitable. The first Jungle Book was written by famed author Rudyard Kipling in 1894, with the second Jungle Book coming out in 1895. The original two books are more a series of short stories instead of one continuous narrative. Many of the stories focus on Mowgli and his friends in the jungle, but we also get other stories like Rikki Tikki Tavi and the White Seal, which have also been adapted separately by Chuck Jones. In fact, getting off topic for a moment, the Jungle Book has been adapted 10 times now, including the upcoming Disney film, with an 11th adaptation scheduled for next year. Warner Brothers has hired Andy Serkis to direct, and it stars Christian Bale as Bagheera and Benedict Cumberbatch as Shere Khan. No word on Martin Freeman, sadly. Focusing back on Mowgli's stories, though, we see a kid who was raised by wolves and is torn in finding where he's supposed to belong. He's not quite a wolf, but not quite a man, and his attempts to include himself in either group often ends in failure. And before anyone mentions it in the comment section, yes, I know it's pronounced Mowgli, not Mowgli, but I've been calling him that for years, so that's what I'm going to stick with. While a little disjointed and not told in chronological order, the stories themselves are pretty good and have a unique flair that I enjoyed. But more on that later. So how good can the movie be when it's really just a lengthy escort mission?
Leon! Help!
Is nostalgia alone enough to keep this Disney classic a classic? Well, let's find out for ourselves as we explore The Jungle Book. Before we begin though, a quick note to those who've asked why I'm covering the animated version of The Jungle Book and not the live-action movie that came out in 1994. Simple reason, really. Money. The animated Jungle Book DVD costs a mere $15. Not much. But the live-action version ranges anywhere between $57 and $175. Supply and demand in action, I guess, and no one is demanding this movie.
You're not an animal, you're a man.
I am not a man!
Linkara would be so disappointed. We open the story in a flashback as told by Bagheera the Panther, voiced by Sebastian Cabot.
It all began when the silence of the jungle was broken by an unfamiliar sound.
Note the obvious look of horror on Bagheera's face. He's never heard a crying child before, but he already knows it's something to be feared. He takes the baby, Mowgli, and delivers him to a wolf pack for them to raise. And that child went on to build the city of Rome! 10 years or so pass, and Mowgli has become a preteen, now voiced by Bruce Reitherman, son of the movie's director, Wolfgang Reitherman. And the infamous Shere Khan has shifted his hunting grounds to include where Mowgli lives. Knowing this, Bagheera offers to take Mowgli to the nearest village, where he'll be safe. But Mowgli isn't willing to leave the jungle for something like that.
And Shere Khan is not going to allow you to grow up to become a man? Just another hunter with a gun?
We'll just explain to him that I'd never do a thing like that.
Nonsense. No one explains anything to Shere Khan.
He's like a politician that way. The two decide to spend the night in a tree, and this is where we meet the first of many new animals on Mowgli's tour of the jungle, Kaa the hypnotic snake, voiced by Sterling Holloway.
Oh, it's a man cub. A delicious man cub.
And as you can expect, Kaa plays a villain who wants to eat Mowgli. But you know what? In the book, Kaa was actually a good guy. Of sorts. He helped Bagheera and Baloo rescue Mowgli from the Banderlog monkeys. Something else that changed from the book, though, is how Kaa conducts his hypnosis. Here he uses rings in his eyes, but in the book, he performed a dance. Strangely enough, it worked on everyone except Mowgli, who can't seem to resist the snake here.
Now, no more talk till the morning.
He won't be here in the morning.
It looks like Mowgli is a goner until Bagheera rushes in and Mowgli knocks the snake out of the tree.
Ooh.
Well, I guess that'll teach Kai the dangers of narrating out loud.
I awoke several hours later in a daze.
Mowgli wakes up the next morning to the Dawn Patrol, a group of military elephants with the unique talent of singing without their lips syncing to their words.
Company! Sarah!
Oh, the aim of our patrol is a question rather droll. For to march and drill over field and hill.
Actually, I'll give the movie credit, there are a few good military jokes in here.
Wipe off that silly grin, soldier. This is the army.
The scene as a whole is mildly amusing, but ultimately pointless to the plot. It exists to reintroduce the elephants in a later scene so that Shere Khan can find out about Mowgli, but that's it. The Jungle Book has a 78-minute runtime, and scenes like this only serve to draw out every minute. Mowgli and Bagheera continue towards the village until Mowgli starts arguing again.
I'm not going.
Oh, yes, you are.
I'm staying right here.
You're going if I have to drag you every step of the way.
This leads to Bagheera getting too frustrated to continue, leaving Mowgli to fend for himself. And this leads to our next animal on Mowgli's tour of the jungle.
It's Baloo the bear! Yeah, that's him.
Baloo was voiced by comedian Phil Harris. He's this relaxed jungle bum who instantly befriends Mowgli.
Pitiful. Hey, kid, you need help.
This is somewhat different from the book, in which Baloo was still something of a sloth, but taught Mowgli the many laws of the jungle. The transition is, not bad, but I can't really call it accurate. Baloo is probably my favorite character here, and he leads into perhaps the most popular song from the movie.
All you gotta do is look for the bare necessities.
It's a decent song, has a catchy tune, and fits in well with Baloo's character, though I'm hardly a music critic. I just know what I like. Eventually, Mowgli and Baloo find their way to the river, where Mowgli gets kidnapped by a bunch of monkeys. This is more or less what happened in the story Kaa's Hunting, but the big difference there is that King Louie wasn't a character in the book. In fact, the monkeys didn't really have a leader. They were just wild and a little bit...
Crazy.
Yeah, that. But in the movie, the monkeys all pay tribute to King Louie here, who quickly launches into his own song.
Now I'm the king of the swingers, oh, the jungle VIP.
King Louie was voiced by Louie Prima, singer, trumpeter, and as he gave away in the beginning of his song just now, he was also known as the King of the Swingers. It's a type of music, get your head out of the gutter. His song, I Wanna Be Like You, is naturally a jazz piece, and I don't know if it's because they hired a professional singer or if I'm just getting old, but this is probably my favorite song of the whole movie. I'm not even sure why I like it. I'm not that big a fan of jazz. I don't get this. Bagheera and Baloo make their way to the ruins the monkeys live in and devise a cunning strategy to rescue Mowgli.
Hey!
Quite frankly, I was expecting a cross-dressing gag, but maybe I've been watching too much Bugs Bunny lately. The plan works in the end, and after the world's most dangerous tickle fight, the entire ruins collapse, leaving Louie with nothing. With Mowgli safe, Bagheera and Baloo take a break to discuss what their next move should be. And while they talk, I'm going to break away for a moment and discuss the animation. The animators used a technique called xerography, which is a dry photocopying technique that Disney hadn't used much before. Combined with the hand-drawn characters and hand-painted backgrounds, the movie is given a crisp style that Disney animators used in a number of other movies like 101 Dalmatians and The Sword in the Stone. And while I'm on the topic of animation, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the number of times this movie reuses its own footage. You could legitimately make a drinking game out of how many scenes reuse clips from other scenes. And that's without talking about the footage that finds itself in other movies. Back at the plot, Bagheera finally convinces Baloo that taking Mowgli to the village really is the best course of action to take.
Now believe me, kid,
You're just like old Bagheera.
Now just a minute. That's going too far.
Mowgli runs off on his own, and then we get a scene introducing our villain, Shere Khan. He's voiced by George Sanders and was apparently modeled after the man.
How interesting.
He just has one of those voices that instantly demands respect, because he's both sophisticated and extremely dangerous.
And now for my rendezvous with the little lost man cub.
Also, he acts just like Leo when she hunts. So we find Mowgli again, trekking on his own, when he manages to get caught by
Kaa!
And my first question is, what happened to Kaa's head?
So nice to see you again.
In the first scene, Kaa's eyes were apart and he looks more sinister. Here, his eyes are together and he looks more cartoony. In terms of character design, either one works, but I couldn't find any reason why they would alter that in the same film. There's having inconsistencies with the book, and then there's the movie having inconsistencies with itself. So Kaa gets his own song called Trust in Me and hypnotizes Mowgli again. Something I didn't mention before though was that Kaa's voice actor also voiced Winnie the Pooh, and Mowgli's actor voiced Christopher Robin. And with Kaa trying to eat Mowgli, it's like we're watching the adaptation of someone's grimdark fanfic. Mowgli eventually escapes because Shere Khan distracts Kaa, and the boy runs off into the jungle once again. We catch up with Mowgli as he's entered some dark and dismal section of the jungle with only a group of vultures around for company. Fitting scene really, since Mowgli's going all simple plan on this.
Go ahead. Laugh. I don't care.
How could this happen to me? I made my mistakes.
And speaking of the vultures, the original plan was to have them voiced by the Beatles, which is why they all speak in British accents. Scheduling conflicts prevented this, unfortunately, but the character designs are still reminiscent of the Beatles. Well, except for the bald one here. Not sure who he's supposed to be. This was done to lighten up the vultures from their counterparts in the books, who were evil creatures who feasted on the dead. These guys, though, get a song about the power of friendship.
My little pony, my little pony. Ah.
The vulture song goes on just long enough for Shere Khan to waltz right in and take over with an otherwise smooth bass.
That's what friends are for.
Bravo, bravo. An extraordinary performance. And thank you for detaining my victim.
And so the final confrontation begins, with Shere Khan finally getting Mowgli within his reach.
Run, friend, run!
Run? Why should I run?
Does this kid seriously not have any survival instinct? Look, the Mowgli from the book wasn't the brightest, and in fact took plenty of chances against Shere Khan, but he always had a plan to back himself up. Here, Mowgli is ready to take a tiger head on with nothing more than a dry old stick. It goes about as well as you'd expect.
Run, Mowgli, run!
Oh, now he listens. The fight then breaks down to Baloo, having caught a tiger by the tail, running in circles trying not to get bitten. It doesn't work too well. Bear ass, the other white meat. Suddenly a bolt of lightning strikes a tree and sets a branch on fire, which Mowgli ties to Shere Khan's tail. Fire, or as it was more creatively called in the book, the red flower, is one of the only things Shere Khan fears, so he runs off into the distance, defeated. And naturally this happens. Bagheera shows up, and after a brief death scare from Baloo, the trio was on their way back to the village. And that's when Mowgli discovers girls.
Look. What's that?
Oh, it's the man village.
No, I mean that.
Mowgli is instantly fascinated by the young girl, who engages in some mild flirting.
She did that on purpose.
Obviously.
But in the end, like all guys, Mowgli falls victim to her feminine wiles. And the movie ends with another round of the bare necessities as Bagheera and Baloo head back into the jungle to wait 35 years for a sequel. You know, I watched this movie a few times when I was a kid. Time changes you. I feel a lot of the initial critical success could have been caused by nostalgia following Disney's death, and not the movie's quality itself. The animation is good, the backgrounds are great, and like I said, the music has a definite charm to it. I didn't really like the music when I was a kid because at that age, music is usually the worst part of movies, but now they're kind of catchy. And the actors did a great job with the songs, as well as making the characters stand out. But if I'm gonna be perfectly honest, the characters are two-dimensional, the story is simple, and there's no real character growth to be found. I know it's a kid's movie, but there isn't even a basic lesson to learn from. Every mistake Mowgli makes just works out for him with a happy ending, often with little action or input from himself, the fight with Shere Khan being the main exception. Mowgli survived Kaa because someone else saved him. And then he survived Hathi because someone else saved him. And then he got away from the monkeys because, again, someone else saved him. The whole thing is like an excuse to have a series of music videos strung together with minimal plot connecting them. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie, it's just that it's okay for a kid's movie. I run the risk of stepping on a lot of people's nostalgia for this, but for me, the movie is just a 2 out of 5. Like I said before, the book was more of a collection of short stories. Many of them were good, some were longer than they had to be. The stories centered around Mowgli were entertaining enough, showing a good amount of growth as he decided to leave his wolf pack and live in the village after single-handedly defeating Shere Khan. And things only got worse for him as he lived in the village, but you'll have to read the book to find out for yourself. Most of the stories are pretty good, but others, like Servants of the Queen, don't have the same level of quality and either drag on or never caught my interest. As a whole, the first Jungle Book gets a 3 out of 5, though if you were judging just Mowgli stories, it gets a 4 out of 5. When Disney was adapting the story, he gave a copy of the book to Larry Clemens, one of the writers for the movie, and told Larry not to read it. That sort of start is what I'd expect from an adaptation like this. Characters are either altered or pulled from the ether, and you can forget anything about Mowgli's identity crisis. Chuck Jones did a more faithful adaptation with the first short story called Mowgli's Brothers, but it definitely doesn't have that Disney touch, either in quality or in tone. Still, I guess it could be worse. At least it wasn't as bad a transition as The Black Cauldron. As an adaptation, The Jungle Book gets a 2 out of 5. Nostalgia's a funny thing. It alters our perception and makes everything from our youth seem amazing. Still, all we have to do is wait and see what Disney does with that nostalgia in the upcoming live-action flick. And who knows? It might actually be good.
Now, when you pick a pawpaw or a prickly pear,
Ow!
and you prick a raw paw, well, next time, beware. Don't pick the prickly pear by the paw. When you pick a pear, try to use the claw. But you don't need to use the claw when you pick a pear of the big pawpaw. Have I given you a clue?
Golly, thanks, Baloo.
Paw. Of all the silly gibberish.
Come on, Baggy, get with the beat. The bare necessities of life will come to you.
They'll come to me.
They'll come to you.
Dude, you still up? Don't you have work in the morning? Can't sleep. Thought I'd read. I got some stuff that'll knock you right out if you want. No thanks, I'm good. Suit yourself. So, you should have been there. My old buddy Mike. You remember Mike, right? You mean from the Marines? Yeah, anyway. He does odd jobs like me now and got me this bodyguarding job downtown. Protecting some political celebrity who gives a crap kind of guy. Anyway, so this guy pushes through the crowd and blah 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 blah. And I didn't think I'd get my shoes tied in time. Blah 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 blah. Hey, are you listening? Huh? What are you reading anyway? The History of English, a complete dissection of language through its evolution and etymological roots. That's the book GC got you, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You weren't even listening! Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm trying to help you find out what kind of mage you are. You could at least not be a dick about it. Wait, what? That's what I was saying. I met a scientist and I think he can help you. A scientist. Mm-hmm. I know a mage who's been personally consulting me, who's connected to a secret society of mages, and you want me to go to a scientist about magic. Well, they haven't figured out what kind of mage you are yet, right? Where do I find him? His name is Alec Finn, and he works in a lab just outside of town. And is this guy good? Oh, he's doing some revolutionary stuff. Real cutting edge. I'll call him in the morning. Let him know you'll stop by. You won't regret it. Foot mage.